Kelaparan, Cok, kelaparan.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh. How are you?
Waalaikumsalam.
Alhamdulillah. Sehat?
Alhamdulillah.
Alright, good. Okay, before we start today, do you have anything from last week? The question, the homework questions, anything? Any problem, any comment? Okay, alright. So today we're going to continue. We're going to look at the concept of the slope M. And then we're going to look at more detail of the y-intercept, that B. And then once we do that, we understand already the slope and the intercept. We're going to we're going to determine the equation of a linear function given some information. So what we did earlier, we have the function, you draw the graph. But now, okay, we have some information. We are going to determine the function. So that is our objective for today. So let's continue with the intercept. And then I need to look at the slope. Now, if you look at the intercept, this is where we stop last time. We were looking at we draw the graph. So you have the slope-intercept form, y equal to mx plus e. That is the slope-intercept form. And this is the y-intercept. And m is what we call the slope. The y-intercept, we already have started talking about it. So what we will do today, just go a little bit more detail. Now, y-intercept, the y-intercept. Y-intercept is where the line, the line cuts the y-axis. So if you look at we draw the graph last time. What's the graph? Okay, for example, the function that you have here, right? The y-intercept is 25. So 25 is where it cuts the y-axis. So that is the y-intercept. So y-intercept, okay, so I think I will write down here. The y-intercept is where the line, okay, the equation or the graph cuts the y-axis. So what is it? It's the value. Okay, it is where, or it's the value of y at x equal to 0. So when x equal to 0, you want to find y. So x equal to 0, you want to find y. So that will be our y-intercept. So the coordinate will be 0, y. Okay, 0, y. That means x equal to 0, there is just value of y. So example here, 0, 25. All right, so it's the point where the line cuts the y-axis. So we call it y-intercept, or the value of y, right? The value of y when x is equal to 0. Example here, when x equal to 0, what is the value of y? The value of y is 25. So that is the y-intercept is 0, 25. So in other words, when x equal to 0, the value of y is 25. All right? Okay. Any question? All right. So in that sense, we can also look at the other point. Okay, the other point is where it cuts the x-axis. So where it cuts the x-axis, what do we call it? We call it the y-angle. We call it the x-intercept. All right, so the x-intercept would be equal to what? Would be equal to, or we can describe it as that point where the line cuts the x-axis. So what is the value of y? The value of y is 0. So you determine x at y equal to 0. So here is the x-intercept. And that would be equal to the, or that can be described as the value of x when y equal to 0. So it's similar, okay, very similar concept. The other one, is Yintercept is x0. Okay. So here, where it cuts the Woi, apa tu? Diamlah. Siapa cakap tu? Nak cakap? Silent lah. Your phone, mute your phone. Okay? Okay, where it cuts the x-axis. So in other words, when y equal to 0, when y equal to 0, you want to find what is the value of x. So that is the x-intercept. So the x-intercept is where it cuts the x-axis. Okay? So for that example, we have y equal to berapa tadi? Negative 4x plus 25. So negative 4x plus 25, you have y-intercept. It's very easy to determine. That is the value of the b. Okay? But for the x-intercept, we need to find, you need to determine the value. So how do you determine the value? So you get the value where, or the value of x, when y equal to 0. So when y equal to 0, what is x? You have 0 equal to negative 4x plus 25. Okay. That means 4x equal to 25. X equal to 25 over 4. That is equal to 5 over 4. 4. Divide the 25 by 4. You get 6.25. So that is 6.25. So the x-intercept is 6.250. So that is the x-intercept, where it cuts the x-axis. So now we are going to look at the slope, right? The slope is the m. Now, what is the slope? The slope, we're going to spend a little bit more time talking about the slope, because the slope is important. So you got the slope, all right, m. What is the slope? Slope tells us the degree of the steepness of the line. Okay, it's a measure of steepness. So slope is a measure of steepness of the line. That means the value of m will give us an idea how steep the line is. Okay, how steep the line is. So that is the slope. So the higher the value of m, okay, the higher the value of m, that means the line will be more steeper. All right. For example, m equal to 2. So let's say compared to another line, m equal to 5. So m equal to 5 is higher than m equal to 2, the value. Therefore, you can say that the line is steeper. The line with a slope equal to 5 is steeper than the line with a slope equal to 2. Okay, so you know, if you want to make the observation, it's easier to look at something like this. Let's say I got y equal to 2x plus 10. So intercept here 10. Okay, so we want to make the observation. You compare to a line with the same intercept. So 5x plus 10. So 5x plus 10, the value of m is higher, so it's steeper. So the line will go like this. So this one, y equal to 5x plus 10. Okay? So that is steeper. Now, when you say steeper, the line is okay. All right. So we want to look at the more detail of that concept of slope. Okay, before that, now the slope can also be negative. All right, so here you got m bigger than 0. The example I give you, m equal to 2, m equal to 5. Now that slope can also be equal to 0, and also slope can be also less than 0. Now, when the slope is less than 0, all right, when the slope is less than 0, you will see the line is going downward. All right, so the slope is negative, the line is going downward. So, example we just had earlier, that was y equal to negative 4x. Okay. The one that you have earlier, y equal to 4x plus 25. That is an example of a line with negative slope. So the line is going downward. Now, when we say downward, what we mean is that the line going downward from the left to the right. So when you look at the behavior of a line, we are talking about from the left to the right. Okay? So in other words, from the lowest value of x, so here lower, a negative lower, to the higher. Okay, lower to the higher. So when we say the line is slope, the line is going downward, or the line is going upward, depending on the slope, what we mean is that the line is going from the left to the right, okay? From the lower value of x to the higher value of x. So if the slope is positive, the line is going upward from the left to the right. And if the slope is negative, the line is going downward. Okay? So example here is where m is equal to negative 4. We draw it already. The line is going downward. Okay? The line is going downward. And the slope is negative 4. But in terms of steepness, okay, in terms of steepness, if I draw another graph here, okay, I draw another line. Intercept somewhere. Okay, here, y equal to say, okay, negative 2x plus 25. Okay, now in terms of the value of m, which one has a higher value of m? M equal to -2 or m equal to -4? Now both are negative. Which one is higher? -2 or -4?
-2.
-2 higher. Okay. For negative numbers, the smaller the number, it means a higher value. But when you look at the steepness of the line, which one is steeper? The one with the slope -4 or the one with the slope -2?
-4.
-4 steeper. Okay. So when you look at the steepness of the line, for the positive slope, no problem. All right. But when the slope is negative, okay, when the slope is negative, from what we can see here is the smaller the value, the steeper the line is. So we are not looking at the value of the slope when it is negative. We're looking at what? We're looking at the absolute value. Okay? So when the slope is negative, when you want to compare the steepness, all right, just look at the absolute value. In other words, ignore the negative sign. Okay? So in other words, for here, just disregard the negative sign. So, of course, you know it's already going downward. All right? We know already that's how the line looks like. But in terms of the steepness, you take out the negative sign. Okay? So in other words, this one, the one with the slope -4, would be steeper. Okay? This steeper. In terms of value, that -4 would be smaller than -2. Okay. So if the slope is negative, okay, if the slope is negative, then here, okay, here is the situation, and you know that, say m, we do the example, okay, m equal to -2 is bigger than m equal to -4, right? Because that is negative. But in terms of steepness, all right, in terms of the steepness, the function with m equal to -4 is steeper. Okay, it's steeper than m then m equal to -2. So in terms of steepness, we don't look at the sign. Okay, we don't look at the sign of the slope when it is negative. So when it is negative, just look at the absolute value. Right? So absolute value, that means 4 equal to 4. And then absolute value of -2, that is equal to 2. So therefore, you make the comparison, this one will be steeper. Okay. All right. Any question about that? So positive, for positive m, no problem. Okay. It's straightforward. But for negative, it should be what? It should be one way to look at it is just look at the absolute. You disregard the negative sign, because if you look at negative numbers, the smaller the value, the higher the smaller the number, the higher the value. All right. But when we look at the steepness, we just disregard the negative sign. That means the one with the then we conclude same thing. The higher number, the steeper the line is. Okay. So example is these two. All right. Any question about this? Okay. All right. So now we are going to look at the slope. Now, what is the slope? Slope is a measure of steepness. Slope, by definition, is defined as the following. It's the change in y divided by the change in x. Okay, divided by the change in x. That means if you remember, if you have y over x, kita jangan panggil m lah, panggil lain. Let's say AB. Okay, if you look at the average is simply y over x. The slope, which is m, is not the average. Okay, the change in y divided by the change in x. So here, it's the m, okay, m is the change, the slope, okay, is the change in y per unit change in x. So m is given, okay, m is described by the change in y for a unit per unit, for a unit, okay, for a unit change in x. So it's about change, okay? It's about change in y for a change in x. All right. So if you look at the example, okay, now, okay, you look at the COVID-19 case. COVID-19 cases. Remember, let's say today and tomorrow. Not tomorrow lah. Yesterday was 10, 11, 10, 21. Okay. And then the day before that, 10, 10, 21, you have a different number. Anybody remember case yesterday? Anybody look at? I forgot. Okay, this is just a number. Okay, I don't know. I'm not sure. Suppose they are less than 10,000. Suppose the number here is 9800. Ini example dia tahu, bukannya betul. Then the 10 would be say 9,000. So here, the slope give you the change. Okay, suppose this is the x, that is the y. The change in the COVID-19 cases, y, per unit change in x. Okay, so if you look at the number here, what is the change in y? Kita tengok ni je lah. 800. Okay, so here the change. We're talking about the change. We're not talking about the number. Okay, the number is different. Or the average. Okay, the average is 9800 over 1000. So that's the average. The slope is the change. All right, the change. All right. Okay. So in order for us to measure the change, all right. In order for us to measure the change, you have to have two values of the x, two values of the y, so that you can do the subtraction change. Or in order for you to find the change in y divided by the change in x, then we start with what? We start with 2 points. Suppose there are 2 points. Okay, one is x1, y1, and then the other point is x2, y2. So we have 2 points. That means the cases of COVID yesterday and the COVID cases the day before. So you have 2 points. Then the slope will be equal to the change in y divided by the change in x. Now the change we write as the triangle. Okay, triangle delta y over delta x. Okay, over delta y over delta x. And given there are 2 points, in order for you to get the change, you subtract. Okay, you take the difference. So therefore, that will be equal to y2 minus y1 divided by x2 minus x1. Okay, so that's how you get the slope. So the slope is given by the difference in the new value of y and the old value of y divided by the difference between the new value of x and the old value of x. Okay, so you got that. So you have these two. So example, we go back to the example that we have earlier to start with. Kita pergi balik. Remember that I started with a few points, when you draw the graph. Honey. Okay, we have this line here. We just fill up the points. The equation was 2x plus 10. 2x plus 10. When x equal to negative 4, 5x plus 12. The equation is 5x plus 12. Okay, 5x plus 12. So we already started with this few points. Now, what I would like you to do, if you have done this, that's good. If you don't, then you have to do this. Suppose you are looking at the point here. X equal to 2, y equal to 3. So these are the 2 points, right? These are the 2 points that we have. Then we want to find the slope. So when x equal to 2, that means you have to find the value of y. When x equal to 2, y is equal to 22. Right? 22. Is that right? Anybody did this? 2, 10, 10 plus 12, 22. 22. Okay, when x equal to 3, we have 20. 3, 15. 15 plus 12, 27. 27. Okay. So we take these 2 points. Okay, of course, you can take any 2 points. Doesn't matter. You can take that point and that point. It doesn't matter which point you take. Okay, afterwards, we can practice doing it for other points. Okay, so given these 2 points, you have x1, y1, x2, y2. Okay, so given the 2 points, I go back to so given the 2 points, let's say I have already determined the x1, y1 equal to 2, 22. And then x2, y2 tadi berapa? 3, 27. Betul tak? 327. Okay. So the slope is equal to the change in y divided by the change in x equal to delta x over delta y, which is equal to y2 minus y1 divided by x2 minus x1. Now, given the 2 points on the it can be any point now, because we want to find the slope. But we make use of that equation. Okay, so that it's more systematic. So given these 2 points, what is the slope? So what you do, you just substitute. So what I will do now to find m, we do it with, all right, substitute the 2 points. Okay. The 2 points into M. Right. So therefore, M is equal to, no, we start here. Okay, we should know that. You should know the formula, the difference, okay, the ratio of the difference. So therefore, M, by doing the substitution, Y2 is equal to 27 minus Y1, 22, divided by X2, which is equal to 3, divided by minus 2. So that is equal to 5. So the slope is 5, which is what? Which is consistent with the one that we have. The line is y equal to 5x plus 5x plus 25 minus 25. So 5x plus 12, I believe. 5x plus 12. So it's, when you do the calculation, you got the value there. So that is the slope. All right? Slope is 5. Okay. All right. Okay. Tadi, I'm sorry. Okay. For the students tadi itu Wadina, no Wadina. I'm sorry. No, I have that. Marah. Okay. So I'm sorry about that. And I give you another example. Okay. Any question about this? Any question about the slope? Okay?
No, sir.
All right, good. So let's go back to the example. Yeah.
Sir,
Yep.
for the Y2 and S, we can what you call it? Like Y1 minus Y2, we can replace the place.
You know the choice of the points. And again, it's up to you.
Yes.
Okay, it's up to you. If you want to say Y1, X1 is 327, X2, Y2 is 222, it's your choice. Okay, because it's a change. So if you do that, you will get the same value. Okay, so the choice of X1, Y1, it's not fixed. It's arbitrary. Arbitrary means it's up to you. Okay, so how you choose, it's up to you. But must be consistent dengan formula. Okay, so if you say the other way around, X2, Y2 is 222, X1, Y1 is 327, then you subtract 22 minus 27. Okay, 22 divided by, janganlah divide by 3 minus 2. You should divide by 2 minus 3. Okay, so the choice is up to you. Okay, all right. Okay, thank you. Any other question? Anything? So the most important thing is millennia. Okay, the difference, the ratio difference. Okay, I'll give you another example, just to get the slope. Okay, go back to the example that I gave you. You know, the table is easy because the table is already moving. All right, now I want you to do this. Take this point, that's 1 point, and the other point is this one. Okay, so I have 2 points. That's point number 1. That's point number 2. Okay, you find the slope. The values of y is already given, you know, the values of x is already known. So get the slope. Okay, what is the slope? Okay, here, all right, the choice of x1, y1 is up to you. All right, you want to, you want to x1, y1, x2, y2, pilih yang mana satu pun tak kisah. Okay, what's the slope that you get? Oh, cantik. Okay, anybody get the value?
Internet.
Huh?
Sir, your internet, we can't hear you.
Oh, you ke?
Internet connection.
Tapi I can hear you.
Sorry, dengar, sir.
Sekarang ni dengar dah sekarang.
We can't hear you, sangkut-sangkut.
Oh,
Expression, sir.
Alah, internet dia punya signal okay. Maybe I got to ni lah, my earphone ni dah nak KO lah. Nanti petang kalau saya nak pergi beli orang baru. Elok sikit. Mungkin sebab tu kot, sebelah dia dah rosak. Okay, sekarang okay sikit, boleh tak? Boleh ke? Ha? Hello? Hello? Okay.
Yes, sir.
Nanti kalau ada problem beritahu. Okay, now, if you do that, if you given that 2 points, what is the slope? We should get 5. Okay, because we know the slope is 5 for that line. So we should get 5. If you don't get 5, that means something wrong with our calculation. Okay, everybody got 5? Dah dapat ke belum?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. You got 5?
Yes, I
Alright.
got 5. Dapat.
Okay, good. Or
Got 5.
if you don't get 5, you go home, redo it. Okay, we should get 5. So that is how you measure the slope. So the slope is the change in x over the change in y. Now I'm going to more detail about that. Before I go into the next part. So is delta y over delta x is the change in y over unit change in x. All right, so I already described here. It's the change in y per unit m. Okay, is the change in y. We should put it the other way around like this now. M, the slope is the change. The change in y. Try the other way around. The change in y per unit change in x is m. So how do you get the m? You look at the m, okay? M is what? M is the change in y for a unit change in x. So for example, that we already determined 5. So that 5 is the slope m. What is it? It comes from what? It comes from the change in y per unit change in x. Okay, now next. The change can be positive or can be negative. All right, so you got you can change. The change can be what? Can be positive or negative. So change can be increased. It can be decreased. Okay, so increase or decrease. Increase, you have, we know how is it, where it is increased. It's a positive number. So increase. it is a negative number, and then it's a decrease. All right. So change can be increased, can be decreased. So therefore, you want to start with the two changes, change in Y, change in M. Now we start with the change in X. Now let's say I put here increase. The change in X is increase, and increase, a unit increase in X. So that means the X now increase is positive. All right. So the change in Y per unit increase in X. Now the change in Y can be also an increase, can be also decrease. All right. So the change in Y here will be given by the sign of the M. Okay, given by the sign of M. If the M is positive, because we have a unit increase in X, the X is already increased, positive. So how do you determine the change in Y? That will be determined by the sign of M. Okay, so if M is positive, what about the increase in the Y? What about the increase in the Y? What about the change in Y? Is it an increase or is it a decrease? Paham tak paham? Paham ke apa saya cakap? So you know X is an increase. Okay? The change in X is the increase, the positive. Okay, per unit increase in X. So if now we want to determine the change in Y. Is the change in Y an increase, or is the change in Y a decrease? So how do you know that? We know it by the sign of M. Okay. Now, if M is positive, what about Y? What can you say about the change in Y? Is it an increase or is it a decrease? Fikir. Increase lah. Okay. If M is negative, all right, is the change in M a decrease or an increase? Decrease lah. Okay, dengar tak saya? Tadi terputus kejap lah. Selalu macam ni. Kadang-kadang internet saya ni, dia tak berapa.
Malam baru dengar. Tadi
internet saya ni pun tak berapa nak bagus. Okay, so now example is M equal to 2. Okay, M equal to 2, that means it's positive. Okay, M is positive. Now you want to interpret it as, or you want to describe it as the definition. Okay, so we know that we say the X will increase by 1 unit. Okay, so when M equal to 2, what can you say about the change in Y for a 1 unit increase in X? So that will be equal to delta Y over delta X. Okay. Now the delta X, we know it's already an increase because I say here. So we have to start somewhere. Okay. We say that the X increased by 1 unit. Now the change in Y, whether Y is increased or Y will decrease, that will be given by the value of M. Okay. Value of M here. Now you see here M is 2, which is positive. So what about the change in Y? What can you say of the change in Y? Y will what? Y increase.
Y will increase.
So you say here M equal to 2, Y increase, which is the value of M. Y increases, the change in Y is M. Okay, Y increases by 2 units. Okay, y increases by 2 units for a unit increase in x. Okay, so that is the, how do you describe the change in y by the value of m? All right, m is the change in y. So here m is the increase in y. Okay, so the increase in y is 2. So you say y increases by 2 units for a unit increase in x. Okay, any question? So example number 2, m equals to -4. Now you have to describe it, but into delta y over delta x. We know that x is a unit increase. So what can you say about the change in y, given that m is -4? Okay. Y increase or y decrease?
Y decrease.
Y decrease. All right, because the slope or the m is negative. So when x increases, okay, when x increases, that y must be decreased, must decrease. Because the sign here is positive. Okay, so x increased by 1 unit, we know. So therefore, given m is -4, the y must decrease. So we say that, all right, we say that, I put here in red. So this new value, y decreases by 4 units for a unit increase in. So everything else, the second part of the description will be the same. So that is when x equal to -4. No, m equal to -4. Y decreases by 4 units for a unit increase in x. Okay. Okay, good. All right, any question? Now, I started with an increase in x. X can also decrease. Okay. Now let's say we start with a decrease in x. That means the x will be decreasing by a unit. So x decreases by 1 unit. All right. Now, if x decreases by 1 unit, if m is positive, okay, if m is positive, then what can you say about the change in y? Okay, I'm going to write. Let's say x decreases by 1 unit. I'm talking about decrease, okay? All right, now, if m is positive, what about the change in y? What about the change in y? Is it a decrease or is it an increase?
Decrease.
Decrease. So, because you have to look at the sign, okay? If x decreases by 1 unit, if the slope is positive, it means the change in y must be negative or decrease, so that you have a positive m. Okay? Now, if m is negative, what about the change in y?
Increase.
If x decreased by 1 unit, so here will be increased. Okay, good. Okay, so here, what I'm saying is that the change, all right, the change can be either increase or decrease, can be positive or negative. Now we start with the x, okay? You start the x because x is the independent variable. X is the denominator. So we start with a unit.
The internet.
We start with a unit change in X.